Hello and welcome once again to DVD number 2. In this DVD we'll be developing the basic elements that we did previously, and we'll be talking about such things as turn, contra-body movement, sway and the function of sway and how it helps you to balance, and thirdly the vertical movements, which are often called swing, and how they affect your movement.
We'll also be talking about the mechanics of the feet, the ankles, knee and hip. We'll also be talking about promenade positions outside partner positions. They're often troublesome positions, heel turns, and we'll also be entering into the difficulties of pivots and spins.
And last but not least, certainly, we'll be also explaining to you the mysteries of such things as the contra-check, the throwaway, oversways, things that give you ice cream in your variations. Now, before any movement is taken in dancing, there has to be a preparation before that movement. And if I were to move, for instance, I'm with my partner here, and if I was to move without a preparation, suddenly it would be very difficult for the lady to follow that. That's in anything. If I move forward suddenly without a preparation, then following these things is extremely important. So preparation is a very important part of your dancing, and it would apply not just in the beginning of our actions, but also throughout the whole dance. There's preparation to new actions. Now, we basically have two types of preparation in ballroom dancing. One is a moving preparation, which you would get into a feather step, and for instance here the left foot will move forward, and that is the preparation. It's very, very simple. It's just one step, but that will give the lady the signal the body is turning. It's the turning of the body and the step, and that's the signal to the lady that we're going to dance now some other form of step. And that slight body turn that the lady gets is a little body swing here, the swing of the shoulders slightly opposite to the movement. The left foot would move forward, and there's the preparation. And the lady will feel that. So if I just did this from this position here, there's a very slight body turn and the step. She knows now that we're going to move, and from that position starts then the big actions that we need to make the figure complete. The second type of action that gives you preparation is a standing preparation, or sometimes in ballet they will call it plié, which means to bend the knee. So on something like that, the body weight would move backward, particularly say in Viennese waltz or something like this. Viennese waltz, the body moves backward. That's the preparation. The lady now, I'm saying to the lady, please pay attention, we're ready to move. It's the backward movement. Now the knee will flex, and away we go. So that preparation is a static preparation, and it's done just through the body itself, moving onto the foot there. In Viennese, the lady's head may turn to the right, as you can see here, and then away we go into the next action. So that preparation is vital. Without that, the introduction of the movement becomes stilted and jerky sometimes, not smooth, and difficult for the lady to follow.
And I believe that as far as the lady is concerned, the most important thing about preparation is breathing, because breathing allows you to produce so many factors. For example, the breathing is the forerunner to using, for example, gravity, because as I breathe out, I'm able to relax my joints, my knee, ankle, hip joint. It also starts to relax the arms. So it means as a lady dancer, I'm ready and primed to receive lots of information coming from the man. And if I haven't produced a breathing action, then it's very difficult for information to pass from one body to another. So if we just do that together, I take a breath in now and release as we go into the preparation step. So once again, breathe in and release. So this is of a tremendous help to being able to be a great partner.
Thank you very much. Well, that's two types of preparation, and we'd like just to show you that now to music. Thank you. Okay, now we'd like to continue and talk to you and explain to you about contra-body movement, which is the technical term, contra-body movement. It means the opposite side moving to the opposite foot. So if the right foot moves forward, the left side, the left shoulder feeling and side feels as if it's swinging forward and moving forward. So we have this opposite action. When you run, you have a similar action. When you're running, the arms and the legs are moving opposite sides. And the purpose of that action when you run is to stabilize the front of the body, to stabilize the center of the body. So if you have too much arm swing when you run, your body would be moving across your line of movement and you'd be very inefficient. So CBM, one of the things it does is to balance you and to stabilize your center of the body over your feet correctly, in balance. So going from here on, say, a feather step, you'd have preparation, and then right foot moves forward and the left side will then swing forward, like that. There you can see we're moving in harmony, and so that helps to balance things. If I do the other side, it's exactly the same thing. The left foot is moving forward and the right side is moving in contra-action. And going back would be exactly the same thing. The right foot moves back and the left shoulder is in contra-action. Right? Going from here, we've got the left foot moving back and the right shoulder moving in contra-action. There's that turning action, that turning effect. And CBM is a very important thing. Technically, the idea of CBM is to prepare the next turn. So if you have no CBM, making a large turning action, for instance, in a natural turn, I would have preparation here, in waltz, here comes the CBM here. That allows me then to swing further onto the side action into the balance position that we talked about in the elements section of the DVD 1. And if I go to the opposite way here, the CBM here of my right side moving forward as the left foot moves forward, this is preparing the next turn. If that CBM is not enough, then making the turn, especially together, will be very, very difficult. So CBM, the function of CBM is to allow the next turn to be easy to do. It also has another function that allows you to dance better together. And if you only have movement that's exactly straight, then there is no counterbalance happening in the action, and so therefore if the lady was dancing just exactly straight here on a 3-step, she would probably go too quickly because both shoulders would be moving at the same speed away from the man. So this becomes a pulling action. The lady would go too fast through her feet, and you can see the slight back balance comes in at this point here, and balancing together would be very difficult. So a little teaching tip that I use sometimes is to describe this as a negative side and a positive side. So we have one side is negative and the other side is positive when we dance. So as I'm dancing a feather step, my right foot goes forward, and the right side is the soft side or the negative side. The left side is the positive side. So I have one side going backward and to the floor, and the other side moving forward. So on a feather step for man, the right side is the negative side and the left side is the positive side. All it means is a turn that is balanced. So you don't have, therefore, if I go sideways here, you don't only have a forward action with no CBM. There's always this shoulder swing, shoulder turn that gives you and helps you to stay together. So if we just show that for you in a feather step and some basic actions here, you'll see that the CBM preparation is there, and now comes the CBM coming in now. My left side is starting to swing forward, and lady's left side has swung to me slightly. So the CBM is coming together, and that allows us to dance from a central position in a very comfortable way. And so Anne's left side, as she moves back, is actually dancing to me slightly. That's the CBM coming in to me, so our centres will stay together. If the lady was to take both shoulders backward at this point here, she would go too quickly through her feet and would be very difficult to stay together, because we have no counterbalance, and counterbalance is one of the very, very important principles that we'll talk in greater detail later. So here we have a negative side and a positive side. We're dancing around each other. There's much more freedom together. Lady's left side to me there. My left side to lady. Now lady's right side to me. I'll check. And now the sides are dancing very nicely. Lady's right side, then her left side, and here if we go into the three-step, from here my left side will dance the negative side, it's the soft side, it's moving slightly backward. You can see at this point, if we open up, you can see the shape at that point is quite good. So there's the shape coming through because of the turn of the body and also the sway, which we will cover later. So CBM, therefore, is a very, very important action.
And I'd like to add to that, particularly from the lady's point of view, as I already mentioned about the breathing, how very important that is. If we combine the breathing action with the CBM, it means that your partner has every chance of being able to lead a very powerful and clear forward movement. So if we just go back to the feather step for a moment, and I take my breath in.
Sorry to interrupt you for a second, if I may, but you notice we're using the feather step, a very basic step, but it's a working tool. It's an everyday working tool that we used in our development of dancing when we were younger. And as one of my teachers said to me, Sonny Binnick, he said to me that you can learn almost everything from foxtrot. The basic mechanics are very, very clear and necessary in foxtrot. So this is one of the reasons where both of us have spoken about the feather step. It's a very good working tool, the foxtrot generally.
So as we take our preparation turn, I take my breath in, and just at this point, as I hit the ball of my foot, you can see there my weight's just suspended in the ball of the foot. And it's at this point, just prior to the turn, I take my breath out. And that's when the combination of the breath and the turn come in together. And I'll show it with my head to the right, that's a very important part of being a good lady dancer, because in fact what you are doing is you are inviting the man to drive forward and to dance with you. So without, as Richard said, without the turn, then what happens is we have difficulties in dancing together. The actual weights start to pull away from each other. So it's a way of blending our movements together. And the more relaxed I am in the upper body, the more mobile I am in turn at the right point. So we'll be talking about timing later, but it's very early in the bar of music. Then the more fluidly and clearly I can follow your information.
The other thing here, there's so much to say about this type of action, and it's extremely important to master this action in your dancing. Otherwise, your dancing will look mechanical, it won't look musical, because the shoulder action is where music is seen. When you see very good dancers, you see the music in their shoulders. This is where you can see the movement and the swing of the shoulders. This is connected, of course, through the whole body. It's the knees are working, the hips, etc. Everything is working. But where you will see the good dancers, you see them, they look musical, they're interesting to watch all the time, because they have this shoulder swing, which we call CBM. It's not just in the shoulders, it's in the whole body. But without that, it looks very mechanical. So if I was to dance a feather step with no CBM here, for instance, going towards you here, there's no CBM, you can see there's only one dimension here. There's only one thing I'm doing, which is to move forward. But when you have preparation and then CBM, then the movement starts to become alive, and you can get a musical response. So sometimes in lessons I will use the timing of the shoulders from here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that gives you movement around your center and not through the center, where it would be very difficult to balance together. And of course the lady is mirroring that exactly, and if we were to do that just maybe without the arms, just the feeling of this, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I take that out and no movement, the only thing I can do then is forward or backward in a vertical fashion, which will lose a lot of musicality. So music generally, you can see a lot in the shoulder action with very good dancers and their knee actions, and the two things are very connected.
I think I remember you telling me actually, when because of your history or understanding of the history of dancing, how important that shoulder swing was from the very outset of the first foxtrots that were danced, that the shoulders were the first part of the body that was really discussed in terms of swing. So the shoulder swing is at the very heart of the slow foxtrot, particularly because it was the very first swing that was really discussed in the pioneers of dancing.
Yes, that's a good point, because originally dancing started in London in very high-class restaurants such as the Ritz Hotel, and the lady would be sitting on that table and the man would be sitting on this table, and the man would ask the lady to dance and she would say, "But I don't know your steps," and he would say, "Well, don't worry, I will lead you." Now the lead was done by the shoulder weight being very far forward, so the body itself could actually lead the lady. This is why it's so much together in today's dancing. And so one of the concepts was that the man had to lead with his body and the lady would respond with her body, and it was the front of the body. Again, the comfort zone was so important. The CBM action, as Anne quite rightly says, originated in the top part of the body, and you can see here how the swing of the arms and shoulders, although we've got a very small hold at this point, you can see the swing of the arms and the shoulders are actually helping to lead everything. Now weight therefore is perfectly together at this point, we're on balance exactly. And that is a very, very important factor. Once you take that out, you will get wooden. The action becomes wooden, gets heavy and not rhythmical. And I remember going to one of the very famous coaches in London many years ago, a man called Charles Theobald, and he was an impressive character. He had wonderful handmade clothes, handmade shoes, lovely shirt and tie, and a large cigarette holder, I remember. And he said to me, "Show me your foxtrot." And I was amateur at the time, and I was standing very badly. I was standing with a back balance, etc., trying to dance from this sort of position. And he, the first thing he said to me is, you're a belly pusher, you're a stomach pusher. He meant that I was dancing only with one point in the body, which was what I was trying to do. I was trying to use my body to dance, and of course that is correct, but I was using it in the wrong way, only in one dimension, which would be forward. But there are other dimensions in dancing, and one of them is the rotation of the body, the turning of the body. And he said to me, be athletic in your body position. In other words, don't get fixed into one position, stiff, etc. Stiffness never works. If you're too stiff, you will never be a good dancer. So you want to be flexible so that the shoulder action in the CBM and the arm actions can flow beautifully through the bar of music. And I remember distinctly, this was a big turning point in my learning of dancing, because he said to me, the second sentence he said to me was, swing your hands, these are the words he actually used, swing your hands across your body. They were the words he used, swing the hands across the body. Well, if you do it badly, of course, it's something like this, which is not what we're talking about. This is wrong. But you can see the swing of the shoulder, the CBM action of the shoulder, and the hands and arms are in harmony. So you actually can see this rotational movement as I move forward and backward. And if I do that for you towards you, from here, here's preparation, left side back, here's the swing of the hands and arms, and that helps to give me a shape, it helps the musicality, and perhaps more importantly, it helps to balance us, because CBM is a big balancer in the body as well as a power producer. The other thing that, and I would say that one aspect that my teacher had shown me, changed my dancing in 20 minutes. I was a different dancer within 20 minutes. And if we just dance that for you for a moment, just have a look at the swing of the shoulders and the arms, how they dance around each other. There's the feeling of togetherness through that feeling. Notice the freedom in the top. We'd really have no tension here. This is very, very nicely balanced. And there it is again. And a 3-step, there's the negative, positive. We're dancing around each other, beautifully balanced. And it's the CBMs that really help us to allow that to dance in harmony. The other thing that's worth mentioning here too, and we will show you in a moment through exercise, that in the book you will see two things connected to this action. You will see CBM, which is what we've talked about so far, in the hands and arms and the shoulders and the whole body turning. And the other thing that the book will describe, it says commence to turn. Now, commence to turn means the curving action of the leg. So when I move forward on, say, a 3-step here, this path of movement, this direction of movement is not exactly straight. What happens, it slightly curves, very slightly. There's a very small curve that takes us into a slightly stronger direction sometimes. It depends on the type of action you've got. So the type of CBM, or the amount of CBM, is a variable. On some steps it's very small, on other steps it's medium, on other steps it can be very big. So there's always a slight curving effect, especially for lady, don't you think,
yes,
on backward actions, etc.
Yeah,
so something like a heel turn, for instance, the lady's curve is really, how much would you say?
Approximately an eighth of a turn.
About an eighth of a turn, yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually quite helpful to sight the elbow as you're entering the reverse turn. In fact, if we just do that now, as a landmark for the foot, as I'm producing the CBM at this point, you'll notice the foot's curving, and I'm aiming to place the foot underneath my right elbow. That's a very big help because it stabilizes me to the center of the turn, and it also helps the man to be able to move around me. So if my foot goes straight back, which I'll do now, I'm going to go straight back. Very, very difficult now for us to turn around each other. So we do need to have the commencement here of the discussion about inside and outside of turn, because by my backward curve, I'm actually generating an inside of turn, curvy linear path, which allows the man to dance around me. And you just used the word curvilinear there, which is a very important word in dancing. So we have three basic types of movement in dancing. You have straight line movement, which is actually very rare. There's not a great deal of exactly straight line movements. You have curvilinear movements, which is what the most of the basic figures are. If I was to do a feather step, for instance, there's a small curvilinear motion, a small curving action. And
feather finishes, for instance, is a curvilinear motion. The one thing that I would say is an exactly straight thing, or as straight as you're going to get, is a chasse in waltz. This is a straight line type of movement. But they are very rare. There's not many actual straight line movements in dancing. And so dancing is based on curves mainly. The basic figures are all based on the curves. And the curve comes from the CBM actions and the commencement to turn of the leg. So the leg is curving slightly. Now that's in harmony with your body. So the 4 blocks of weight that we have in the body are all going to curve in harmony with the feet. And there's a good rule here. At the end of a downswing, beat 1, beat 2 in foxtrot, beat 1 in waltz, your centre of your body, centre of gravity here, would be in the same line as your feet. And you often see on feather finishes, for instance, the man will go into CBMP or across his body here and then turn. Now the lady has no chance to stay with him now. And if we just do that this way, you can see this is wrong. This will be a cross. This is a twist type of action. The lady has a lot of trouble now in balancing that. So what I've got to do is to make sure, if I do it backward for you, make sure if you watch the direction of movement here, is a curving action that allows us to be balanced correctly, or square as we say in English. A square position at the end of the downswing is very, very important at this point here. So our centres of gravity, the 2 bodies can balance exactly together. And if you watch it when I do it wrongly, here I'm going the wrong way, I'm going across, and you can see very difficult for Anne to balance her body with me. This would be very heavy and out of balance, etc. So that little rule is a useful one because it applies everywhere in every dance. I can't think anywhere where I wouldn't be thinking of doing that on forward and backward element movements. So in our basic element we didn't talk about turn at all, we went exactly straight. But with when we go into more advanced dancing, then we need to curve it slightly, and the rule is at the end of a downswing you must be square to your feet. So your centre line, your necktie line, and your foot will be in the same line. How much do you think you can, what do you think you feel in how much turn you can do?
Yeah, I would say approximately an eighth.
An eighth normally.
More, yeah, it'd be a little less.
Yeah, there's only one interesting place that we have here that's quite a lot actually, is a slip pivot. And slip pivot is a difficult step for most people, and it's often because they go too straight at this point. So on a feather finish here, the CBM comes in, and here the commence to turn, or the turning action, you can see, is actually a quarter of a turn here. So I've gone from this position to here, a quarter of a turn, and I finish here, and then continue to here. So when you're dancing, just check your foot direction on something like this, the curving action. That's a very strong CBM. And if lady does that, just do that for me, darling, from here. Do it as lady. Just do it as lady.
Oh, okay.
So you can see how much turn she's doing here. You see, lady's in the pivot situation, so that amount of turn is going to be very, very important.
Yes, sorry. When you asked me the question, I should have said it depends on what you're dancing.
Yeah.
So if it's a basic swing, then it would be approximately an eighth, maybe a little more, it could be less. But if it is
stronger
turns, then obviously it would be much greater.
A greater curving of the leg.
Yeah.
But the basic rule will be the same. At the end of a downswing, you are square, you're dancing in the same line as your feet. And one of the reasons the feather finish people have so much difficulty with the feather finish is that they go too straight at this point and then usually move forward instead of moving on a curve. You'll see that I will curve that first step, that first swing, and that gives me big movement and a line of movement that's very balanced, etc. Okay, so I think we've talked a lot about CBM there. CBM applies to every dance, slightly different timing sometimes, and there might be some details that are different. But basically, that's what you're trying to do on all downswings that you create, beats 1, beats 2. Thank you. Okay, we'd now like to continue with one of the fundamental actions of dancing. We talked about turn in the last section, and now we'd like to talk about sway. And sway is also extremely important in high-level dancing. The function of sway is twofold. We have two types of functions. One is to balance the body. So if I was to do a side balance as we did in our element in the elements earlier, you have here a side swing, and that sway that you can see, the angle in the body at this point, it helps to balance your body when you're moving at greater speeds. In our elements that we did with the side balance, we only did it very slowly, and there was not a lot of speed going on, so we don't really need a lot of sway. So sway, the first function of sway, is to help to balance the body. Now, the sway, there are two types of sway. There's the pendulum effect of sway, where the leg swing that is creating a lot of the sway. If you look carefully, you see my head doesn't move very much. The head is not moving that much. At that point, you can see the head is there in a very similar position. It's not doing something like this at this point. Now, in pendulum type swings, which are usual in your main basic steps, then this type of swing is coming from your center of gravity, your hips and your legs. So the base of the body, the bottom half of the body, this is where the swing is coming. The head will move in space, but it will not move very metronomically at this point on these types of actions. So you have a central swing sideways, and that causes a sway factor. I put the arms in, you can then see there's a very slight curve at this point. Now that curve can change. It can be a minimum, it could be medium, or it could be very strong. And it would depend upon mainly on the speed of what I want to do on something like that. So it acts as a counterbalance on something. If I was to do a natural turn here on a slow type of speed, then the amount of sway is not very much. You can see here it's a small amount of sway, and this is quite adequate, and it would look very good in a competition because you're creating good lines. The 4 blocks of weight are lined up again. Here's the first movement going forward, as we talked about. You've got CBM coming in there. Now on the side balance, here's the leg swing and the hip. Here comes the pendulum working from back there to here. That swings forward, and that allows the center to change its angle, and the central angle of the hips and the center of gravity now is changing the angle, and that helps to balance us. And this type of sway is probably 90% of the sways that you have in your dance, and that would apply to waltz, to foxtrot, and to quickstep in that way. Tango, of course, there is no swing type of sway. The second type of sway that we have in the swing dances is metronomic sway. And metronomic sway is usually used when we have a static type of action, where we might do, say, a same foot lunge, for instance, here, and you can see the head is moving. This type of sway is coming from the upper body. It's metronomic. Sometimes it used to be called broken sway, but I think that's a dangerous word because people then think, oh, it's a broken side or something like that. So what we have here is a movement from the top of the body, which is metronomic. We move into the line, and then the top line moves to the right. If we just do that together, you'll see that Anne's head action is very similar to mine. There's our metronomic action coming from there. It goes this way, and you can apply the same idea that we talked about earlier about the negative side. The right side would be the soft side for lady, and then from here the sway changes back to the left for the lady, right for man. So there's a metronomic action from here, and then again from here. Yeah. So they're the two types of sway. One is what we could call artistic sway or decorative sway, and the other type of sway is the functional sway. The functional sway is the one that you're using all the time in curvilinear movements. So let's just do that to some waltz steps that we can show you, just some simple steps here. We're thinking about CBM and the negative and positive sides so that we stay in balance, and also the sway factors. So from here you'll see the pendulum is working as we come through now. There's the extra sway that we've got. We wouldn't get that in the basic element, but now we've got the sway. This is the one that balances us. And then from here, if we do an impetus turn, you'll see the sway changes again. And again, it's changing from the base of the body. It's changing from the base of the body because we're on balance. The sides are not stressed. And here, if Anne just does that by herself, you'll see the shape of the centre is coming from the leg swing and the hip swing, and that causes the head to change to the right. If you just do that by yourself, darling. From here, this is a base swing coming into the position into promenade. And although you see the head active quite a lot on things like this usually, it's not actually done very much from the head. It's actually done from the legs and hips. It's the legs and hips that create this type of movement. And again, we're on balance at this point here. And you can see this is basically a well-balanced type of sway action, etc.
Actually, I really like to stress in the ladies' corner part of the DVDs that how vitally important it is to use the legs and the hips, particularly to produce the type of motion Richard was mentioning about the pendulum action, because that's really coming out of the leg and hip area and not from the head, which is a very, very common fault that ladies produce. They overuse the head weight, and that means then it's creating side loads, which means there's weight pulling off away from the centres of the body. And I know particularly Richard doesn't like that because it means we're destabilising the balance of the centres.
Yeah, I mean, you just used the expression side load, and that's a very good explanation of when weight goes wrong in the body. If you can get your body balanced in such a way there's no side load on the body, for instance, if Anne puts her arm out here and I push down, this is a side load on her body, a side weight on her body. It's like a pulling effect that will be pulling her off balance. The same can happen if the lady or man, it doesn't matter, just using an example here, if the lady pulls backward here too much, this is a side load or a backward load on the body. So the centre of gravity would be really disturbed and would be very difficult to balance. And so going sideways here, the action of the legs and the hips creating the pendulum is helping to balance the body as it makes the sways. If you were to, as you say, make the head too active, then, and when you're moving as well, this all moving around will become side load on the body. And the most efficient way to balance is when you have no side load. And so therefore, in the Elements DVD 1, we talked about the 4 blocks of weight of the head, the shoulders, the rib cage and the pelvis, and how they all line up. And the start of balance, as I said, is in the head area. And so if this is moving around all the time in the wrong way, then this gets very, very difficult to balance. So you'll see with good dancers, they sway and they make shapes, but it's really coming from the base of the body, through the centre of gravity area, through the hips and legs. So if we just do that once again, we'll do the impetus turn again. And here, we're nice and relaxed, we've got negative, positive sides, and there's the sway. At this point, if I made more sway, I could look to the right, and we would increase the sway a little bit more. Some people like to do that. That's a variable. But it would depend, it would be connected to the speed you're moving at, and as I said before, the function of the sway is to balance the body in motion. If we were to dance from here, going into a weave action from here, therefore you've got the same type of thing happening. The lady has CBM there, and then we come into balance at this point. You can see there's a small feature of sway, not a lot. If I take it out, perhaps you can see it better. It's no sway now, and there's the small sway that you can see at this point. Sometimes this feels, sometimes you describe it as a spiral, isn't it? You say sometimes you feel like a spiral effect.
Yes, and in fact, from the ballet term, you have a term called épaulement, which means a leading turn from the upper body. Now, of course, as Richard said, it's not only coming from the upper body, but what the épaulement allows you to do, it allows you to prepare your turn. So I often use the example of a turning arabesque. So if I go forward onto my right foot and I produce the épaulement action, you can see the pull of the turn coming from the upper body, leading the direction of the head weight. So you can see my head still over my foot. If I do it in the other direction, you'll see the same thing. And in fact, that's a very good way of developing your turn and sway combined together, but in order to do that, you can see you have to have your head weight lined up over your foot. So there's no way I could do that if my head is pulling. Well, I can do it, but
Well, it's counterbalance.
that's counterbalance.
But not too much.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a good way of rehearsing your turns.
Yeah, good point. And if you look at the weave action from this angle, going in here from the promenade position here, you will see that the man's action here is a very strong spiral to the left at this point here. So if I do it on this angle going through from here, you'll see the man's action at the top of the body. Here's the head coming over the foot at this point here, and that helps to give us quite big space at the top of the body. I'm still in balance. I must stress this, that balance is the key on anything that you do. So don't neglect your balance. Try not to grip each other. Try to dance in balance with a feeling of comfort and efficiency. Dancing should be efficient because you need to swing. So
and you discovered the principle of balance, which is you can go slower to balance or you can counterbalance. So
that's true. So the principle of balance of anything in movement is that you can go slower and don't do a lot. So on a feather step, for instance, here, I could take out the turn and sway. I can still balance, but I need to go slowly. If I want more energy and more power, then I need to be able to create counterbalances which come in the form of turns and sways. Usually the turns and sway. And on this type of thing here, you have these actions going on, the turns and the sways, and they are helping to balance the body over the foot. You can see we're both balanced perfectly over the feet. So the spiral effect that you're creating here is a very nice picture, because spiral is really the combination of a turn and a sway in dancing. We have a turn and a sway working together, and it's very, very useful sort of action. And we have this probably on nearly every turn that you do. If I do a left turn of some sort here, there's the spiral effect at this point here, and you can see my head is pretty much over the left foot. It could be slightly more if I want to, and some dancers do more and some dancers do less, but you never see them square. You will never see good dancers completely square. They always have some sort of shape going on. And the shape, or the word shape, is sort of a modern term, really. And what it is, it's the combination of a turn and a sway connected to a vertical movement. So the three types of movement you've got in dancing: you've got forward and backward movement, as we talked about in the base elements. We have the rotational actions that we talked about through CBM, and now you have the sway type of actions. And these can come from the base of the body, or, as we just discussed, you can get them from the top of the body. And it's those three actions coming together that give you shape. And it wouldn't matter what I was doing, that always must have shape. I'm never square. I rarely want to dance anything square. A contra check, for instance, you've got the turn and sway coming in there. You imagine me just doing that without turn and sway, it would be very square and very, very boring, probably, to dance. The lady doing exactly the same thing. From here, you'll see Anne is going to create the spiral again at the top of the body, and the base in position, and therefore balanced. And therefore she's creating shape. So shape is the combination of turn and sway plus the vertical movements. And that would apply to any dance that you're going to dance. And if we dance some foxtrot here, you will see, going back to our basic working tool of the feather step here, there's a preparation. Turn and sway comes in there. Now from here you've got the CBM coming in now, and now here's the sway and the spiral effects. You can see the heads are separated. Now from here, there's the curving action. The center's created the turns and the sways. Now here, CBM and the sway feature coming in now, the slight spiral. This can be extended a bit more if we wish to, and we'll find a limit there through practice as to how much we could extend that and still be in balance. Balance is the key, as I said before, and we don't want to disturb that balance that becomes uncomfortable to dance together. And when you look at very good dancers, you see the ease of movement. It looks easy, and that's because the two bodies are dancing in balance. The only other thing is I like to feel from the lady that I have an invite from sometimes the rib cage feeling. And so therefore, for instance, the feeling of the lower part of the body has done partly CBM, etc., but then, and the sway features, but I feel the slight spiral also is coming through not just the top of the body, but also the rib cage area as well.
Yes.
Do you feel that?
Yes, very much so. And you've got some muscles that go from the sacroiliac joint up into the sides of the body, which when you use the sides, it has a pulling effect on the hip area as well. Now, of course, you can use the base area, and in fact should use the joints in the base, but if we just isolate...
I'm going to talk about that as well.
And we will talk about that later, but if you're isolating that particular area, then the more I use the sides, the greater pulling effect it has also on the legs and
Let's just do that again, shall we? So we'll do that again in our basic actions from here. You'll see turn and sway comes in. The sides are really working nicely. And this is where we're creating, therefore, a balanced type of motion. Okay, so sway, therefore, has got two functions. Number one function is to balance the body, really. That's the most important thing. Without sway, then you're limited to one type of speed in your action, which will get very boring. The other type of action you have in sway is metronomic, and most lines, many lines, are metronomic, which we'll talk about in more detail later. We'd like to continue now and talk to you about the third type of important action that we have in dancing, and that is the frontal plane action or vertical movement. Some people just call it swing, but I like to be a little bit more exact. And earlier we talked about turn, and then we talked about sway. Now the third type of movement or dimension in dancing is the frontal plane movement, which is, we talked quite a lot about forward drive in the first video that we did, but I'd like to develop that point now into the understanding, a greater understanding of what that type of movement is doing. So the forward movement is connected to the four blocks of the body, if we turn sideways, the head, the shoulders, the rib cage and the pelvis. And the forward drive that we talked about here, you can see the line is from the head right through to the toe. But dancing today has developed from only a vertical movement into a swing action of the vertical plane that really explains a lot of why today's dancers create more space than they did years ago. So what happens in action is that the angle through the center of the body actually changes slightly upward as you swing through. And that angle changes through the hip line, and that changes the spinal line. If Anne just does that for me, just do it as man for me for a minute, just a feather step. So here you can see, as she comes through here, this angle changes slightly with the swing of the leg and the swing of the hip. And for me, this was a massive breakthrough. I was in Germany many years ago teaching, and a friend of mine said to me, "Why is it your turns look different to the other dancers?" And I didn't really know why. And I came home and I started to think about what was maybe different. He said my turns looked longer. And on a reverse turn in foxtrot, for instance, in those days, generally the concept was to step and then turn, step and turn. That was the general concept. Now, I started to look for the reason of why my turns look longer than my competitors, and I was in Blackpool practicing one day, and I was doing a telemark type of position, and I got to hear about this position here, and I thought to myself, well, what have I done here? It's not just turn, it's not only sway, there's a third thing happening here, and I suddenly realized this is working like a pendulum underneath, and the center of gravity in the hip swing is actually swinging like a pendulum, like a vertical movement there. If I take out the turn, I would be there and you would see it quite clearly. But with turn and sway coming in, it gets disguised into a three-dimensional type of action. So this type of movement, I realised, was the reason the three actions of the vertical, the turn and the sway all blending together is actually the reason of why my turns look longer than other dancers. And if Anne does something like a feather finish, for instance, as lady, you'll see here she drives off the back leg. Here's the shape coming through here. Here's the angle change. The centre's moving upward, and you can see generally that the frontal plane of the body is actually changing. And this is a big difference, a big development in dancing. And it's a very important element on something like a three-step, for instance. Here, there's the frontal plane in position now. We start to move as turn and sway come in, and the frontal plane starts to change. There, it's changing through the bar, and you can see the top. This opens the top line. If I was to lose that, you would see the top line comes in even more and than normal, and you would lose the open space that you see in the dancer. The lady going backward, what do you feel that...
Well, I think that if we just repeat that again, and when we stop at the point that you mentioned,
okay,
the frontal plane is changing from here. Now, if you take a look at the back foot and then the centre of Richard, through my centre to my head, you'll see one line. And that line has been caused by the change of angle of the frontal plane.
So from my left foot...
Yes,
to
exactly,
your head,
exactly,
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we repeat that again, you can see that line from your back foot through your centre to mine and to the head weight causes the production of space. And if we do that once again without the change of the frontal plane, you'll notice a big difference. Even though we've got turn and sway, you see the production of space now is really limited. So the basis of the lady's shape is coming out of the change of angle of the frontal plane. And in fact, if I drive backwards from here, as I arrive on my right foot, you'll notice that although I may be still in a very deep position in the supporting knee and still in fact connecting very much to gravity, the centre of the body may now at this point be changing angle in coordination with the man. So even though I may still be down in my supporting foot and, of course, the knee joint and ankle joint, the centre is preparing to swing up. And that's why we get such depth in the base and, of course, in the space of the two spines.
It's interesting that you don't get this action in tango. We will be doing a lot more information on tango, but because you have no rise and fall and no sway, you don't really have a change in the frontal plane in tango. It's just the same position as you would have normally. So this angle through here is actually changing when we rise, when we swing through. That angle you can see is changing. That would continue upward and through the lady's body out into the headline. And this has been a big development in dancing. I would say it's the biggest development for many, many years. It's the biggest development is really the spatial development. And in many years ago, you could see, if you look at the old photographs, you'd see the heads were very, very much together. But it's the opening of the frontal plane, the frontal action, that actually increases the general spatial quality of the couple. If I was to not change that central angle, then you would see the whole thing actually comes downward and into a much smaller position. And this is what you will see with all couples today. Space, therefore, is a very important factor that comes from the frontal plane action. So if we just use our working tool of the feather step, etc., and you can see here that the drive from the base is opening up the top more. There's the shape coming through now, and again here. We come round the corner, and as we go into the three-step again, just watch the shape again from here. You've got knee, and there's the big change that you will see, and that's the big shape that you see today. And it doesn't matter what the step is, you will see always this frontal plane changing. There for lady. If we do a quick open reverse, there again. And so the base of the body is always up to each other, is the feel. You never feel that the angle will do that. The angle is up to each other. There's a good hip position and a good central position. And therefore, the top feels open. If we lower to that position there, you can see the top line is still open. And then from there, and again, there's the shape again that you can see, from left foot through to lady's head.
So now we're going to move on to the mechanics of the base of the body, and just before we give you some exercises that we use on a regular basis for teaching purposes, I can't stress enough how important it is that you have strong feet, legs, upper leg action, thigh into the hip area, because that is the basis of your stability. It's your foundation, and without the correct mechanics in the base of the body, it really simply is not possible to support the spine and the head weight. So again, it's absolutely vital that you understand how the base of the body works and what should be happening in the lower area of the body. And my philosophy, particularly as a lady dancer, is that I must produce and generate as much power in my legs and feet as the man. So I'm trying to equalize the power that goes on between us. This way the partnership becomes more balanced. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the rotational action. If you stand with your feet around about the hips distance, so the distance of your hip is where your feet should be, flex the supporting knee, and as always, check that the 4 blocks of weight are lined up so we're in balance. And what you're going to do is to feel that the hip area, first of all, is turning in a forward and backward direction, so the rotational factor. And you'll also feel the hip joint is also relaxed and flexed. So if I just turn to the side for a moment, you'll see as I'm making this turning action that the knee, the ankle, and the hip, all those joints are flexible and they're mobile. So they're all relaxed and working through the action of turn. Now, in fact, if you look at my knees, they are moving forward and backward, as are the thigh area and the hip. So they're all coordinating in harmony with each other. And if we were to just bring this together from a side angle, you'll notice that as this action takes place, my knee now is moving to a position where it's dissecting the line of gravity of Richard's body. So the more we use the knees and thighs, the more we're able to integrate and interact through the base of the body. So that's just an example of the turning action. And if we then do the same thing with the sway plane, which will be where, again, the hips are moving up and down, like the negative and positive action Richard mentioned in the shoulders. And once again, you'll see how the thighs and the knees are also moving up and down. And Richard has mentioned a few experiences from his career and the inspiration that teachers gave him. And I remember distinctly one of Peter Eggleton's lessons, him showing this fantastic movement of the thighs and knees going up and down. And I remember reading one of Richard's golf books. Not that I play it, but I read the books. And there was a very nice subject on the real truth about swing. And it mentioned how important it was that the knees are moving up and down as well as the thighs. Because if they don't do that, then the hips will simply not swing certainly through the sway plane. So that lesson that I had with Peter and reading the golf swing book brought together for me a very clear image of what is happening in the base and how active the knees, thighs and hips are. So if we bring that,
should we do that?
all together, yeah.
Okay.
So we now produce the turn and sway. And often when we're doing this exercise, we make the upper body very relaxed so that you can really feel how the base is activating your top and not the top activating the base. So this, we will discuss this particular subject in a later DVD, but we are really looking here at reflexive power, which is where the motion of the base comes into the upper body. So big muscles, big joints first, and that filters up through the whole system. So we can put that now into that's
action.
An example, into our base steps, and we'll now combine the mechanics with the upper body. So now we're using knee, thigh, hip. It's interacting with each other. So all the shapes you see in the upper body are coming from the knees, thigh and hip. Thank you.
Good. I'd just like to make a point here, is that this is closely related, of course, to contra-body movement, which we talked about earlier. And many times I dance with ladies who have no invite in their dance. They're either heavy to move or you may be together, but it's not really great feel in dancing. So I found that when on a feather step the lady can activate the knee and the hip together, this action here is part of contra-body movement, as we talked about earlier, but this time in the lower body. And the action of the knees and the thigh muscles and the hips all coming together is very important. They actually do slightly different things, but they are very, very closely linked. And often I find that ladies just go straight back in the hip line and they don't create any rotational movement, and therefore the knees also don't work correctly. So the feeling we have here and the function is worth pointing out. The function of the knee is to bend. So if we do that sideways, you'll see that the knee will bend. That's what the knee is doing. That's the function of the knee. It bends and straightens. And that allows us to create time on the standing leg. For instance, doing a forward movement here is a preparation, and now there's the action of the knees bending. The knee will bend, and then the hips are turning in the same motion, and they start to then move off into the frontal drive, the driving action that we did in DVD 1. So therefore, simple way of thinking about this: knees bend and hips turn and start to swing. They then start to create motion backward, which gives an invite to the man. So blocked hip positions, meaning no turn in the hip, especially from the person going backward, can become very difficult. And if Anne just shows here backward feather step or something like that, you'll see it's knee, hip, and that's the start of the invite for the man to come through. So it's the knee bending, the hips turning, and then that comes up through the upper body into usually sway. So you've got three major actions working here. You've got knees bending and the hips turning, and then as we move off, the hips start to swing, and that's the frontal plane changing its angle and creating invite for the man, or vice versa. Then that usually doesn't stop there. It usually comes up the spine and into the shoulders. So if you would just dance this individually, just take it from over there. If the camera goes to Anne here, you'll see everything's working. Knee, hip, shoulders, knee, hip, shoulders, knee bends, hip swing, shoulders sway. Knee, hip, shoulders, knee, hip, shoulder. And that is continuing through every bar of music. Beautifully done, even though I say it myself.
Thank you very much.
Now, if we put that together, you've got this working, again, through the bars of music. You just look at the knee, the hip, and the shoulder actions here. Knee will bend, the hips will swing, and the shoulders will sway. Knee bends, hips swing, shoulders sway. Knee, hip, shoulder, come round the turn. Knee, hip, sway. Knee, hip, sway. And we continue this time to a weave. And from here, if we do a quick open reverse again, you'll see the knee flexing, the bending of the knee, the turning of the hips, and then the swing, and the shoulder continues the sway action. And so the whole body, through the mechanics of the big joints in the body, the knees, the hips, and the shoulders, these are the three really big joints that are very, very important. So try not to tighten any of these joints. Try not to use too much tension in these areas.
Actually, can I? I'm going to butt in.
Go on.
That there may be many ladies watching this that dance with tall men, and there's a strong likelihood that you may have quite a big difference in your leg length. Now, from experience, using very active actions from knee through the thigh to the hip in turn and sway, the man feels as if your legs are much longer than they actually are. So they feel that your legs are finishing up here, and it does create a lot more space for the gentleman to be powerful in his forward movement. So that's a very important part of backward movement. And the earlier you create the turn and sway, the better chance the man has got of being able to drive really fully through his forward element. And I think that's really vital to a good lady.
Thank you. And now we'd like to conclude this DVD, number 2, with some information and notes on rise and fall, and the different ways that we can rise and fall, and the way we use, therefore, our ankles, feet, knees, and body to create rise and fall. Now, in a general sense, the knees will take us down. There's the lowering, part of lowering, and the ankles and the feet push us up. So we have a lowering action in the knees and a rising action in the ankles. And that is the basis of rise and fall in the lower part of the body. Now, I'd just like to mention to you here an idea that I had a few years ago to create greater power of movement through the rise and fall. And that is that the knee is a large joint. It's the biggest joint in the body. There's more, actually as a joint, it's the number one joint in terms of size. Although the hip joint is more flexible, it can do many things. The knee only does one thing, it bends basically. So what I used to try and do when I'm dancing on basic motion here, we did before in video 1 the forward drive, and I mentioned and talked a lot about the hip action, how the hip moves us forward, but the hip doesn't move us downward. What happens is that when we do preparation from here, then it's the knee that starts to drive diagonally forward. So this left knee, if I go this way, you can see it driving diagonally downward into the floor that way. The feeling is that it's going, and both knees in fact feel as if they're attacking the floor 1 meter ahead of me at this point. So if you don't bend knees when you dance, you're very restricted in the type of movement that you have. If I just show that, this is a no knee bend action, no rise and fall. It's a very flat action. I'm reasonably in balance, but there's not a lot of volume happening because there's no rise and fall in the action. If I just do that once again from here, you'll see my body weight is moving across the floor, but the actual volume of movement is not very big and would not be very exciting or create a lot of energy in the dance. So to increase the volume of movement, I increase the lowering action on this first part of the bar. And what happens here, this knee starts to really push forward that way to the floor, not vertical movement, because that would make the hip sit. So in video 1 we talked about the drive from the hip, and now we're adding in the knee action to create the lowering action as we move forward. And lady, if Anne would just do that as lady for me, a feather step or something, you can see the knee is actually now moving forward as the hips start to move backward. So she's got these two actions going together, and they're really simultaneous. When we dance together, the knee and the hip are moving together, and it's that push from the standing leg, the hip and the knee working together, that creates a term I like, which is the power move. The power move is the knee driving diagonally to the floor ahead of me, not vertically. If you only drive vertically, then you don't move at all. So that's what you see sometimes when you see this type of position. So the hips have not moved. But hip only is a restricted type of movement. So we need to create the knees and the hips, or creating the power package. This is your power package in the lower part of the body. So for both of us, the lady's knee will move to me as the hips are starting to create the CBM and move backward. By the same token, the same time span, my knees are moving forward, and I'm trying to push the knee diagonally forward in front of me to create a large volume of movement across the floor. So here you'll see knee driving across the floor. From lady, from here, her right knee now will drive diagonally. This increases the volume of movement, and the bend of the knee starts to create much more power. So this is what I call the power move. It's one move in your dancing, one action in your dancing that is really important, that knee is actually pressing not just onto the floor, but also in a diagonal type of way as well. And so you get the two actions working together. You've got body weight moving, which would only be falling, and you've got the lowering of the action through the knee, and the two things come together. And so you get a diagonal type of movement like that that goes to the floor and then gradually comes out of it, a bit like a plane coming in and lowering there and then starting to take off again. So lowerings in waltz and foxtrot have that same type of action, even though the timing might be different. In Viennese waltz, the music is much faster, and so the amount of time you have is not so much. So it's much more, not so much of a bending action, but much more of a direct driving action to get the body weight onto beat 1 and 1. And you can see here, you don't have massive lowering action, you just don't have the time. Quick step would be the same. In quick step, you've got the weight moving across the floor very quickly, and not a lot of lowering action because you've got 200 beats a minute to deal with. So you don't have time for this big power move. It's really body weight moving only in those dances. But in waltz and foxtrot, you do have this power move where the knee, the big joint of the knee, is pushing diagonally forward ahead of you. Now, many years ago, when they first wrote the technique, they wrote down on 1. And a lot of people interpreted that to be actually a sinking movement and a down feeling at this point here, and it made them look heavy. So they changed the way of writing the technique, and they said rise at the end of 1 in foxtrot. So rise at the end of 1. Now that rise is trying to describe the action of the hip and the leg, a feel of drive and turn and sway coming through, creating a shape in the body that creates the feeling of rise. And if you watch Anne's action here, you'll watch the knee action. It's the lowering action, that's the drive off the knee. The hip starts to turn, and that torsion comes through the body, and that's creating body rise that gives us the light feeling together at the end of the beat 2 in foxtrot and the end of 1 in waltz. But they're mechanically very, very similar in their actions. So the rise that you see in the book is actually connected to what the body is doing, is the feeling of rise and not dropping at the end of the action. Now, if you don't drive properly, if Anne just drives forward from a feather finish maybe, just going that way, you'll see how the look of upness is here. There's a feeling of upness. Can you see this right side here is actually swinging upward at this point, and this is where the body rise is coming in. Just do it going that way, Donnie. So from here, you watch the right side. She's driving off the knee. That hip has done its full work there. The knees work the hip, and therefore the right side now is a feel of stretch coming in, and it's caused by torsion and the spiraling effect that we have that we talked about earlier. Okay, now there's two types of rise I'd just like to mention here, and one is called a swing rise and the other is called elevation. Now in waltz you have here the power move of the knees taking us downward and the drive coming in to there. Now we have what's called a swing rise, which takes me to ball of foot only. I'm on ball of foot at this point here. I've not completed the rise yet. From here, you have continue to rise, and this is where elevation takes over. I'm now using my ankles and feet to their fullest amount to get the full rise at that point there, and that's elevation. So you have here the downswing, and then a swing rise, and at this point it's just ball of foot. I'm just off the floor at this point. I'm not on full rise yet. And then after that, as the hips, if I do it this way too, you'll see the hips swing across, as we talked about in the sway action. The center of the body weight moves across, and that will cause the elevation action, and that gives me the full elevation. And you have that a lot in waltz, especially when you're closing your feet. It's particularly important in waltz. In foxtrot, you normally only have swing rise. So on the second step here, there's a swing rise there. That's come from the swing of the leg and the hip. And I hit ball of foot. There's the ball of foot position, and the weight will continue forward, but I don't go any further up. I'm not moving up anymore, and you can see it's just ball of foot at this point. What a lot of dancers do at this point, they do the lowering very nicely, they get to here, and then they push up again, and in foxtrot, that is disaster. So this type of action here, where you get down, up, down, up, is really not very good foxtrot. And the essence of foxtrot, the character of foxtrot, is a very smooth type of movement, a little bit like a very big, smooth river moving very smoothly. Now, and I remember that many years ago in Blackpool, there was a very famous dancer, professional dancer. He won the tango. He was first in quick step, third in waltz, and fifth in foxtrot. And he was fifth in foxtrot because he danced his foxtrot on the toes with massive rise and fall, down, up, down, up. And that is not foxtrot. That is that's nearer to a waltz type of rise and fall. So to give the character of the dance, you want to keep this very smooth. And in foxtrot, you want to feel that your center of gravity is always a very similar level from the floor. So you never push up to straight legs. You never extend the ankles upward. There's no push up. So if we just dance that once, you'll see how smooth this type of movement looks from here. It's very smooth. I'd never push up in foxtrot. It's always across the floor. And so there's the toe, but it comes into ball of foot immediately, and then we can settle. Now, three-step, again, no rise in the feet, very little rise in the feet, but quite a lot of body swing. You see, the body swing, the central angle changes, and that's what gives us our rise in foxtrot-type actions. So we're not looking to go up and down very much in foxtrot. In waltz, yes, you are. On the first step, you're lowering slightly more in waltz than you are in foxtrot. The knee action is a little bit deeper because the musical time is different. So in waltz, you're deeper on the first action, and then the reaction to that can be greater elevation on beat 3. So the other thing that's just worth mentioning here is that you have also what's called progressive lowerings. And this means that you're moving progressively and lowering at the same time. Now, if this were waltz, and if we take this as a promenade position, for instance here, this would be beat 2. We're coming into beat 3 to there. That's beat 3. Now, the weight on beat 3 is central. And then on 3 and, the second half, 3 and, we are down, and we should be down when the foot passes. And this is called progressive lowering. As the foot passes from here there, that's when I'm down. And what would be wrong here is to keep the height, the rise going too long, and now it becomes a fall into beat 1. And this causes lots of problems in promenade positions because the hip then gets in the way of the lady. So what happens here, you come in behind the foot's in front of you now, we're central, and we just relax the legs into it, and we're down at this point. That happens also on a feather step. From here, you've got to hit slow, quick. Now here, I lower slightly into the foot like a plane comes into land, behind the leg, and now I'm really down. What would be wrong if you create more elevation upward, and you keep your weight up and then try to lower, it would be too long in the air. So again, foxtrot is very similar to a plane landing, whereas waltz is very similar to a helicopter. A helicopter goes up and down, and a plane comes in on an angle. So if you just watch that once again, we'll do that from here, and you'll see, again, the very flat type of action that you've got the knee and the hip working, and we're very flat on the floor. The shape is coming through the hip line and through the center of the foot, the center of the body, and again on a 3-step, very flat movements, and this is what allows everything to continue into the type of foxtrot that keeps it on the floor and very smooth. Okay?
Okay, so just to finish off this section, one of the things that we found in our own career very helpful was the use of ballet exercises. And the use of the action of plie, demi-plie, and releve is the basis of rise and fall. And as an independent exercise, it's very helpful in developing your physical expression, and also eventually, with the combination of breathing and musicality, your musical expression. So when we do this exercise, we'll do it with an accompanying breath. And in fact, if we go into first position, again making yourself aware of the blocks of weight, if we go up first and take a breath in, so breathe in and go up, and I'm just wobbling. So, and then as we go down to the demi-plie, we're going to breathe out. And then we go back up, breathing in and out. And back in and out. Now this is a very good way of entering into the realms of breathing in combination with your movements, because when we enter the DVD in musical expression, breathing is expression. That is the basis of how we are able to express ourselves. And so by doing a short exercise like this, which is part of rise and fall, you're starting your coordination of breathing with your movements. So it's a very good place to start. And it will also, of course, as you're going up and down, from the down action, you're strengthening your thigh muscles and, of course, your calf muscles. And in a position such as this, you're strengthening the ankles, the feet, the muscles around the calves, and so on. So it's a very good way of developing your rise and fall muscular strength in the legs and feet.
Completely agree with everything you say there. And all good dancers have strong feet and legs.
Absolutely.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope now you have lots of information that will help your dancing, and you certainly have most of the elements there that can make you into very good dancers. We'd like to now conclude DVD 2 with some dancing for you, and we're going to dance some waltz and then some foxtrot. Thank you.